Starting? Okay, we're live. Hi, we made
Hi,
it.
everybody.
Hi. Um, we are going live. I'm in a new location. I'm in my daughter's nursery right now because we have a bat in our basement where I normally do all of the Substacks and podcasts, and I didn't want to be thinking about that
Yes.
during our conversation. So, thanks for joining me, Dorothy.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. And as Anna and I are apparently two technically challenged, smart women. It took us a little while to figure out how to get this on. But part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation is after reading your book, Famished, I felt like you do such a great job articulating some of the ways that misogyny comes into and infiltrates the diet and the purity culture. So that was, one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation with you. In terms of intro, for anybody who doesn't know me, a wife, 35 years, mom for three grown sons, grandma, and also author of three books, the most recent, For the Love of Women, Uprooting and Healing Misogyny in America.
Cool. Yeah, I love For the Love of Women. And I felt like you gave the groundwork for so much of like the personal stories I was telling in my book. I feel like you really delved into like the history of misogyny and what that's looked like in church culture and then like the larger culture.
Yeah,
So I feel like we have so much that we're speaking to in conversation with each other in our books.
yeah,
I'm Anna Rollins. I'm the author of Famished on food, sex, and growing up as a good girl. It examines the rhyming scripts of evangelical purity culture and diet culture. I live in Huntington, West Virginia with my husband and three kids. I'm a freelance writer. I taught in higher ed. I taught in an English department for almost 15 years. And yeah, and I'm writing and coaching now.
great. Well, let's dive in. So, in my opinion, what qualifies as beautiful is highly subjective and varies from culture to culture. And I talk about this a lot in chapter 5 of my book, which focuses on media and entertainment. And the expectations that get communicated to us as women through entertainment and media and other various channels is that to be acceptable, you have to have a certain kind of body. And at least here in the US, that kind of body is thin. And the metric is not simply in the secular world, like it infiltrates the church. And as a result, I think that many church cultures expect women and teen girls to be hyper controlled about what we eat and what we wear. We're supposed to be thin, but we're supposed to be sexy, but not so sexy that we cause men to stumble. And it's a really tough balance to achieve, I think, particularly for teenage girls. So I'm wondering, do you agree with that assessment? And could you share some of the ways, some of your experiences in this kind of hyper controlled, impossible to meet standard culture?
Yeah, I think that early on, like this language isn't used when you're coming of age, but you kind of learn that the body is almost like this canvas for morality and it is judged like the body, it almost functions like a text, like
Mm,
discipline and control and all of that. We're kind of taught that like that is made manifest in a physical form. And so I think that I grew up in evangelical culture. I was in a school that probably leaned more toward fundamentalist. And so there were these very exacting standards of
mm,
what women should be like, and then also how they should appear in public. And so I came of age at the height of purity culture. So I'm um, learning, I'm reading Joshua Harris's I Kissed Dating Goodbye and Captivating by Stacey Eldridge and all the like the 1990s purity culture staples. And all of those books kind of taught women like good Christian women were quiet, submissive, controlled. They waited. They did not go after something. They they were in control of their appetites,
yeah.
and that was something that I transferred to like my relationship with my own body too. And I saw this with women around me. Um, in my school, there were very strict modesty standards, and all the girls like were aware of this, which was very interesting. But when girls hit puberty and they would develop breasts and look more like women, like they would often get into more trouble for their dress and their clothing. Um, and it was never explicitly like said that they were being targeted because their bodies were becoming sexualized, but like we all kind of understood that was what was happening. We would make jokes in the locker room and like say like, "Oh yeah, like I'm looking more like a woman, and that's why I got pulled aside during homeroom today." Um, and so there was kind of this understanding that like becoming a woman was dangerous, like it was imbued with
Right.
power, but we needed to like be very controlling of that power. So yeah, that was definitely part of what I was absorbing as a young girl.
Did that feel highly toxic to you? Like, did you end up feeling ashamed of your body as it was developing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're going through when that's the water you swim in, you don't know what is toxic and what is not. I remember feeling hyper vigilant and like
Mm.
um uh I don't know if I would have used the word ashamed at that point in my life. I think looking back, it was shame. Um, but I felt like I needed to somehow try to control an impossible situation. And that left me anxious and nervous and all the all the emotions you might feel when you're being asked to do something that is unreasonable.
Yeah, yeah. And early in the book, you write, I wrote this quote down. I considered how I bought into the scripts offered to me by both diet culture and purity culture. That if I controlled my appetite, I would be in control of my world. That if I made myself smaller, I would be better and safer. And I wonder, can you explain what you mean by better and safer? And what was it that you were trying to control, or what was it that you felt like you were being told you had to control?
Hmm. Well, I think that I think a lot about how in purity culture there's almost this predator prey narrative that you're given. Like women are almost taught that men are predators and women are prey, and to keep from becoming a victim in that scenario, you need to do what prey do when they're being hunted in the wild. Like you make yourself smaller, you hide.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
you are aware of your surroundings, and I think that that narrative, I mean, if you read a bunch of the purity culture staples during that era, there's kinda like this teaching that men are these insatiable animals who can't control their appetites,
Right.
and you are this pure angelic being who has, more ability to, keep from doing all those things that you desire. And so, because you have this like moral high ground in some ways, it is your responsibility to control these animals by controlling yourself. Um, and so I think that like that narrative kind of trains women to do what someone who is being hunted would do. Again, that's not like explicitly. I
Right.
think in some of the texts it's explicit. I think that that predator prey like actually is present in some of the language that is used. But that is a lot of like the logic that is undergirded in those kinds of advice manuals.
And what's crazy making to me is even as I'm hearing you flesh that out a little bit more, is that all the pressure is put on the women and the men, it's like there is no expectation for them to grow up. There's no expectation for them to gain sobriety or to gain self-control. And that just feels like that's such a broken system.
Yeah, um, and in some ways it keeps both people from growing up, right? Like
Right.
both parties, um, one one is in charge, but ultimately can't control themselves, but then the other party can't do anything, but all the onus of responsibility is placed on that party. It's a really strange inverted system, and I think that it leads to, uh, delayed growth for both
Yes.
people. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
yeah. You talk about this in your book too. You talk about let me find the quote. On page 13, you say one of the consequences of misogyny is that women get blamed when bad things happen, even if the bad thing even if the bad thing happens to them. I thought that was wonderful, like very astute. How have you seen this manifest in church culture?
Well, in some ways, I think that what we were just talking about gives one example, right? That men give women the scripts, the rules for how we're supposed to act, how we're supposed to look, and the focus is on controlling ourselves. But then when men have moral failures, it's somehow our fault, which feels a little bit hypocritical. Another just really key example that I talk about in the chapter on the church, which is chapter 7, the scandal, the sexual abuse scandal in the Southern Baptist denomination. And this was reported on by the Houston Chronicle back in 2019. And what they uncovered is that there were decades of physical and sexual abuse that happened mostly to women and children, some men, young men, but mostly women and children. And I think that the number was over 700 victims of this abuse. And that is horrifying enough, right? That all that was happening within this denomination. But then when the women started to go public, the SBC leaders denied it. They covered it up. They protected the men who were the abusers, and they actually vilified the survivors. One key SBC leader referred to the disclosures as satanic scheme to distract us from evangelism. I mean, the fact that the men were not outraged that this had happened to the women is just a clear example of men being unwilling to take responsibility for their actions and express sorrow and sadness and grieve and then make amends, make reparations for the people whom they have harmed. Instead, it's easier to just blame the women, to say it's all their fault. And we can see that happening right now in our country with the Epstein files. Like it just gets played out again and again and again.
Yeah. Power protects itself,
Right.
begins to worship power rather than like righteousness and justice.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, um, so you talk a little bit more in Baptizing Sin about shrinking the self to appear safe and good. And in some ways, so that logic of like shrinking the self, if if something bad could happen to you and you know you won't be believed, like you've seen that played out in your life, in some ways it makes sense that like as a way to protect yourself, you do shrink.
Right.
Because if that is what has been modeled for you, then there is logic behind that
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah.
Um, you make this observation: restricting or silencing marginalized voices becomes even more consequential when there are no clear criteria for reporting abuse. So, how do you think church structures perpetuate the false belief that smallness or silence means safety?
Yeah, I think that, this might be a reach, but in some ways it feels like there's this Faustian bargain that we women agree to, that if we shrink, if we make ourselves smaller and quieter, men won't feel threatened. They won't feel challenged, and then in return, they'll be attracted to us. They'll pursue us. They'll love us, and this is key. Supposedly, they'll protect us. We're left with some power in that equation, the power to attract and to please men, but that feels like sort of a broken and manipulative power. It doesn't feel like a godly power. And then rather than being encouraged to walk in freedom and to become our full selves, to use our voices, to eat with pleasure, to experience sexual desire, we're diminished. And the goal is about pleasing men. And this is really incredibly misogynistic and harmful. And then further, and this is so important, that even if we adhere to the rules when abuse happens, and it always happens, like that is just such a horrible thing to say, but it always happens, we're trapped because speaking up violates the rules that they set, that they imposed upon us. And it means that we're not good girls anymore, right?
Mm.
And there's just way too much evidence that shows, as you just mentioned, that men don't protect the victims. They protect each other. That's what they do. They circle the wagons around those people who have been accused, and they blame the women of lying. So getting smaller and muting ourselves within a patriarchal system, and then trusting men is really, it's a trap. It's
Mm.
a trap, and we get stuck in it. And the only way out of it is for us to be, I think, willing to use our voices to say, no more. Like, we are just not going to tolerate the system anymore. And that's really scary because there can be real ramifications for us.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that that connects to the subtitle of your book, Famishes on Food, Sex, and Growing Up as a Good Girl. So I wondered, like, can you define what did it mean, or what do you feel like the communication is? What does it mean to be a good girl? And are the prerequisites, or at least two of them, being small and being silent?
Yeah. I mean, I think that all of those behavioral character, like I was a good girl. I was very quiet. I remember a teacher saying that he sometimes forgot I was even in the room, and that served me in the settings I was in. And I think that, well, you kinda see, like, being a good girl is, being easy and to get along with, going with the flow, not challenging authority.
Mhm.
Um
That's key.
Yeah, yeah, and, being a helper in many ways, like, just coming alongside and propping up the real voices in the room, the voices who matter.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that that was what I was taught through, like, I mean, you learn through models and examples, and you learn by seeing how people are punished.
Mhm.
See how, like, when another young woman is opinionated or, like, maybe voices doubt or, is more risky or has leadership qualities and actually pursues those. You see with the gossip and the, exclusion
Mhm.
or the way they might be punished, when they go after their leadership goals and they don't do it just the right way. Um, so you kind of learn by looking at the victims around you. You're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's not safe, and that's not safe."
Right.
So it's a lot of pattern recognition, and, and that's something that you carry with you. Like, I, carried that good girl mentality, and there's a certain point, at least there was for me, and with I interviewed dozens of women for my book. You reach a certain point where you realize that following even that script still won't keep you safe. Like,
Yes.
there is no amount of shrinking or silencing that will ever be enough to, um, make you impervious from harm. And I spoke to so many women. A lot of them, like, came to this reckoning during motherhood. That was a very common,
Mm.
story. Like, I think when women realized that they needed to learn how to use their voices, if not for themselves, for the good
For
of
the
their
kids, right.
children. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, they had to tap into agency that up until that point they had tamped down to, stay safe and to submit and to be good. Um,
Right.
and when you haven't practiced that your whole life, you don't know how to do it. It feels scary, like it's very hard
Yes.
to access. But then, at least for me and for a lot of the women I spoke to, once you do find your voice and learn how to advocate and you realize some agency, then it's very hard to go back to the previous.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It's almost like, oh, that person is gone now. Or at least that was the case for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that, like, we see, like, our ideas of goodness mapped onto what we believe about bodies too. Like,
Yes.
um, we see it in moral language that is used when we look at food marketing or, like, marketing of diets. There's so much, like, moral language being good or bad, sinful, indulgent, etc. Like, so much of, like, the body is judged as a text for a person's character.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And the ways that we fat shame, or if you don't have this particular type of body, you lack self control or that you're lazy, as opposed to realizing that there's a lot of different kinds of bodies out there.
Yeah,
And the reality is, if all of us are created in God's image, then all of us reveal a component of God. We don't just have to be a size two as women.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, we there's a Christian diet culture. Like, there's, diet culture has religious roots. Like, a Presbyterian minister was one of the first people in the 1850s to, like, start, like, a diet that was sold and marketed, and it was, like, sold as a way to, like, have more discipline and more character. So it wasn't just about body modification, even though that was part of it too. It was also about, like, character modification via, like, what you took into your body.
Was that
Like,
Kellogg?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think that was Kellogg's cereal too, right? Like, that was
Yeah.
sold as them, and I think that it was sold as a way to, like, is this correct? It was, like, to stop people from masturbating too? It was
It's very possible. It seems like that would be connected.
yeah, yeah. So, like, the roots, it stems from like it goes all the way back to religious settings. And then like in 2012, the Daniel fast, that was like
Right.
a best-selling book. It was used in all these churches. I interviewed all these women for my book who uh, did the Daniel. There was the Daniel fast, and then I think the Daniel plan. But this, this group church diet in their
Right.
culture. So it's something that like is institutionalized too, and it's
Yeah.
normalized, and it's viewed as like this not a thing that people would consider would be a bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so what was your own experience of like, what did you learn what made a good woman? Did it feel restrictive? Did it feel life-giving?
Yeah, I think it changed over the years. So I started following Jesus when I was in college, and the first organization that I was part of happened to be a very complementarian organization, meaning that there were very defined gender roles. Women could lead in the home, but not out in the world. And that was very confusing for me because I felt like already at that point I had self-identified as being a leader. I was a leader all through high school, student body president, all those kind of things. And it was clear to me that being passive was not that was not something that was part of who I am, who I was created to be. So there was a real cognitive dissonance for me as I entered into church settings and tried to understand, is it okay for me to be a strong woman? Is it okay for me to have opinions? Because I have opinions about, like, everything, I'm sorry to say. I am not one of these, like, easygoing, go with the flow kind of people. So I had to really wrestle with what does the Bible say? What do I feel like Jesus is calling me to? And is it to be quiet and silent and submissive, or is it to walk in the fullness of my gifts?
Mhm.
And ultimately, after reading the Bible and talking with some women who had been part of the Christian culture for much longer than I had been, it became clear to me that that constraint that was being communicated to me was only one brand. And for some women, maybe it works, maybe that's fine. But for me, it did feel like it was highly restrictive, and that in the constant muting of myself and the constant getting smaller, it was causing like actual physical symptoms. I would feel sick to my stomach and have headaches. So I had to really get to the place of being clear that, again, though some women might find freedom in that space, that was not true for me. And I had to sort of bust out of that and find a Christian community that was supportive of women being in leadership and being having voices and being strong. Like that, you weren't just good by being weak or passive. That you could be a good Christian woman and be a strong leader.
Yeah. That's been the biggest thing I've been grappling with too, of that good girl mold, which doesn't actually make you a good person.
Right.
It it makes you smaller, weaker, quieter, but it doesn't necessarily have integrity. Like finding a new script where it's not like it's not like, okay, now I don't care about anything at all. Like I still very much care about righteousness, but what does that look like? Like what does that look like outside apart from this, like, very narrow script I was given during
Right.
childhood.
Right.
Um, and I think, like, the fact that it doesn't look like any one thing necessarily is both, like, life-giving, but also we like our formulas and we like to check
Yes.
our boxes.
Yes.
And so that's why it's so hard to, like, pin down. It Goodness still matters. Like and beauty, like true
Right.
beauty, like that's matters too. Yeah. So, we both talk about purity culture in the book, and you talk about social media. You talk about like how women are portrayed on screens and how that leads to objectification. And I thought
Mhm.
that you made a really smart connection when you talked about how like so much of purity culture ends up like teaching women to self-objectify.
Yeah.
Um, you give some examples in your book of that. Could you elaborate more?
Yeah, I mean, to me, objectification means to reduce a complex, multifaceted human being who has thoughts and feelings and desires and weaknesses and strengths to be an object that someone can control for their pleasure. And that's what pornography is, right? It's reducing a woman to an object so that a man can have sexual pleasure. And objectification and misogyny are both present in the purity culture and the diet culture, because women's bodies and women's sexuality, I think, are seen as vehicles for men's sexual pleasure. Like that's what we get reduced to. We get objectified to this very limited thing. And it's so important for us to remember the standards that the men are imposing on us are not based in reality. Like almost to a one these days, it's based on pornography, which is not reality at all, and AI. So there's a way that we just have to continually recognize that and push off from it and say, I am not submitting to something that is not in reality and it's not based in what the Lord would have for us. And I think when we as women agree to this system of objectification, what we end up doing is aiming for male approval. Like that becomes the thing that we're chasing after and protecting our virginity because that's their ultimate goal, it would seem, rather than working to integrate our sexuality and pursuing the God-given gifts, which are not simply marriage and motherhood. I think that marriage and motherhood are gifts for some women, but it's not the case for everybody. So when we objectify women's bodies, we as a culture communicate that women exist primarily for male pleasure, and we also skew sex to be about male pleasure. And that's a setup for disappointment and abuse, I think both for the woman and the man, because if a man is just about having his orgasm, he's never going to learn what true intimacy is, and he's never going to learn what mutual sexuality looks like. And that's where there's real joy and real life-giving essence that comes out of it. And when we talked before, you asked like, what's the difference between that and gospel-centered theology of the body and of sex? And I think that gospel-centered embraces the incarnation and acknowledges that all bodies are beautiful and affirms our desire for food and for sleep and for touch and for intimacy. So I think that it's so different. It's so utterly different. The gospel centered is about all of us being fulfilled and all of us being able to flourish, where objectification is really just about male sexuality and male pleasure. So it just feels like it's such a diminished version of what sexuality and incarnation are meant to be.
Mm. That's so good. Yeah. Well, I loved your book. It I felt like it laid the groundwork for so much of what I was trying to capture in the narratives that I was telling from my own personal story and from the women I interviewed. So I'm so grateful that it exists and that
Thank you.
I hope so many people read it. I hope men read it.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Are there any questions in the chat for either one of us? I don't know if there are. I'm so
Yeah,
grateful
and one thing that, do please follow both of us. One of the best ways, obviously, you can support writers is by buying our books or sharing if you've read the books. I'll be happy to give a copy of one of my books away if you follow Anna or I, and then just leave a note saying that I was part of the live conversation, and I'll just randomly pick somebody. And maybe as we close, Anna, do you feel like could you share a little bit about how have you reclaimed your appetite for life and for food and for just intimacy in this particular season?
Yeah, I feel like what you were saying about how it's good for us to need rest. I think even like embracing my needs as not things that need to be fixed, but like as information about
Yes. Yeah.
um like my humanity is not something that needs to be solved. Like it's
Right.
actually beautiful to need rest, to need food. So much of what I talk about food and sex in the book, I feel like also has applied to my relationship with work, and I've really had to like think about how for so long I really kind of digested this narrative like that to be good was to not need.
Mm,
And so trying to recover from that and to like embrace my that I am limited, that I am human and finite and I need things including rest. So much of it has been that. Just thinking of goodness not in terms of just how much can I possibly prove? How hard can I work? Um,
mhm.
but
Mhm.
my goodness exists outside of that framework. That's been huge for me.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, and that feels like a great place to end, if you would agree with that,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you. This is such a good conversation
Yeah,
with me.
and thanks for, those of you who showed up. We
Yeah.
appreciate that you were here with us.
Yeah. Thank you so
Alright,
much. Take care. Bye.
bye.